And so, now for someone who knows about these plant medicines a lot, we have Chris Kilham, the medicine hunter, who has written many books about ayahuasca and other plant medicines and been around the world interviewing in various traditions on these plant medicines. And will be giving us one of our headlining speeches of the weekend. So thanks to Chris.
On a warm, sunny fall afternoon in 1967, I decided to,
It appears to be on. It's green.
Okay, thanks.
Maybe if I eat the microphone. Let's do this all over again. All right.
So on that afternoon in 1967, I decided to spend my Saturday at boarding school a little bit differently by getting high for the very first time ever. So I took a very small white capsule of LSD, and that was my, as Joseph Chilton Pierce would say, crack in the cosmic egg. It was a remarkable day. It was a joyful day. At one point, I was sitting on a bed and I started laughing so hard that when the laughing seizure was over, all of the bedding was all over the room. The mattress was off the bed was turned upside down, and the couple of people in the room who were utterly straight were looking at me like this. And I had a remarkable experience because I had the actual immersion experience of everything, every time, at all times, ever, without exception, being completely one and totally connected. And this changed a lot of things in my life. I wound up taking up the practice of yoga and meditation, which I've been doing daily for about 45 years. I got involved in medicinal plants. I started to travel the world. I became more and more interested in indigenous native cultures, leading me to the work that I do now, traveling all over the world, investigating medicinal and other psychoactive plants of all sorts in different cultures, spending 10 years in the South Pacific drinking kava, becoming a chief and a fire walker there, traveling around India and the Middle East and Africa and Northern Asia, and visiting various places where psychoactive plants are used, and of course conducting vigorous bioassays on them all as I encountered them. And this started, this whole experience with psychedelics. What does psychedelic mean? Psychedelic means mind manifesting. And when Humphrey Osmond came up with this term in 1959, he brilliantly described both the microcosmic, the individual sense, and the macrocosmic, the gigantic universal sense of possibility of these agents, that you can manifest mind. There are people who foolishly say that we use 7% of our brain. Ha! What do they know? The fact of the matter is, according to neurologists, the possible number of connections between neurons exceeds the number of atoms in the universe. Think about that. And what happens when you take a psychedelic? The pathways melt away. And the linear or the established lines of neurotransmission one from another that are habitual and behavioral and part of our body of knowledge and our sense of identity and our personality as we imagine ourselves to be just dissolve. And that ego dissolving experience results in a sense of infinity. Infinity because, like in the movie Lucy, all of a sudden we are in fact in touch with 100% of our brains, and that vast, more, greater number of connections than all of the atoms in the entire universe, nest of who we are and what we are made of, becomes our fully immersed reality. That's the promise of psychedelics. Now, I got involved with South American shamans, working with them, studying with them, living in the Amazon, starting in 1993. Spent a couple of months in the Amazon from 97 on, living with natives on the river, traveling around, going to see shamans. The native people I was with said, "Why do you want to go see shamans? I said, well, gee, they possess this vast body of knowledge and they're incredibly talented, and the loss of a shaman is like the loss of a library. And they said, that sounds interesting. We want to travel with you. So I wound up renting a gigantic riverboat in the Brazilian Amazon, and all of the native people I was staying with and all of their neighbors' children, laundry and cooking came with us. And we went all over the Amazon, and we met with all kinds of shamans of various sorts. And then I wound up in the company of this little tiny, tiny, itty-bitty, desiccated 103-year-old woman named Maria Sina. And she met me, and she still completely had her wits about her, and she had long, kind of golden gray hair, and these hands that were as smooth as any hands I'd ever felt. And she said, I'm just going to do a little ceremony on you, dear. And I said, oh, that's so sweet of you, you know. And she touched me about the head and shoulders, and she did the same, and she chanted a sweet little chant, and then she did it to the shaman friend I was with that I had brought back to the Amazon for the first time. He'd been away for 11 years, living in Washington, D.C., and we both had the sensation that we were starting to cook from the inside out. And it was a hot day in the Amazon. It's almost always a hot day in the Amazon, but it was really, really hot inside, and that was the curious thing. And she said to me, you bridge the worlds. You tell people about each other. This is important for you to do. People need to understand each other. And that was like a grandmother telling me, kind of giving me my marching orders. And my friend Akupiara and I went back to where we were staying with some Ipashuna natives, and we basically spent the entire day and night throwing ourselves repeatedly into the Amazon River because we were so broiling hot from the inside. We felt like rotisserie chickens. About 8 years ago, I got involved with ayahuasca. My first experience was with a shaman in the Peruvian Amazon, a brilliantly talented man. I'd gone to him for resolution of grief over the death of my mother. And I was given the ayahuasca by him, and he gave me this little glass of ayahuasca, which I drank, and I sat down beside him. And before the ceremony started, he leaned over and said, in Spanish, he said, listen, if this isn't strong enough, you can have more later, maybe in about an hour or so. I said, okay, thanks for the tip. And an hour later, I was on my back, sobbing with laughter, completely in the thrall of this extraordinary plant medicine that had accelerated like the space shuttle, just rocketing off into an infinitude of dimensions, one after another, and going, my God, how could anybody imagine that I would want more ayahuasca? And the next night, the first night, I resolved my grief over my mother's death entirely, and it never, ever, ever came back. And the second thing I had asked for was to get my energy back, so the second night, which was when all heaven completely broke loose, I wound up being visited by a giant anaconda that hovered over me and said, hey, do you think you're in control? And I said, oh, I'm definitely not in control. And it pulverized me with energy in the center of my chest so hard and so long, it actually felt like somebody was just driving their fist into my chest all night long. And I said, there's only one way I'm going to get through this. Resistance is obviously futile. The only possible way is to completely surrender to this, and I may have a bunch of cracked ribs when this night is over. And then at some point, the shaman called me up to sing to me, and that was crazy because getting up, I realized that my entire back was completely on fire, and my spinal cord was exploding, and my vertebrae were popping like little hand grenades. I was thinking, oh, this is a really weird night, as I staggered over to this shaman, and he sang to me, and it was remarkable, and I felt harmonized and beautified and exalted and just totally in the divine. And then I went back to my mat, and the anaconda said, welcome back. And it started in on me all over again, and this went on for hours. And the next day, you better believe I had my energy. I could have swum to Bolivia. I was just full of myself. What are the promises of psychedelics? What is the promise of ayahuasca? Ayahuasca, the only combinatory hallucinogen in the world. made of the vine Banisteriopsis caapi, sometimes by itself just called ayahuasca, and the leaf chacruna, rich in DMT. Put together by ingenious pharmacologists. How did this happen? How did this happen? Now, the straight people say, well, obviously it happened as a result of trial and error. Sure it did, buddy. There are about 10,000 vines in the Amazon. There are 80,000 higher plants with leaves in the Amazon. Sure, and if you do the calculations, if you do the odds, it's about a 6 billion to 1 long shot that they would say, well, hey, I got a great idea. We'll take this vine and this leaf, and we'll pound the hell out of this vine. We'll put a lot of it in a pot. Then we'll take a whole bunch of this leaf and put it in. Then we'll do the vine again. Then we'll do the leaf again. Then we'll do the vine again. Then we'll do the leaf again. Then we're going to pour in about 30 liters of water, put it on the fire, and let it sit for 8 hours. Sure. What do the shamans say? Well, obviously the plants told us. Hello? That's what the shamans say. It's the most simple. I mean, don't they talk to you? And we, as disenfranchised as we are from nature, as estranged as we are from the fundamental biological genetics with which human beings have lived for millions of years up until recently, can only say, well, actually, no, the plants don't really talk to me anymore. And the shamans find that odd, because they live in a natural world. Doesn't mean they're perfect, doesn't mean that we should believe in everything they say. They say their phlegm is sacred. I don't want it. No, by all means, please keep your phlegm. It's too great an honor for me. What are the promises of ayahuasca? True healing. True healing puts into order the body, mind, and spirit with the past, present, and future. People come to ayahuasca because they have traumas they cannot resolve, because they have fears that destroy their lives, because they have recurring headaches that nobody can fix, because they have stomach aches that will not go away, because they have chronic fatigue syndrome, skin disorders, cancers of different kinds. And in many cases, they get healed. And unlike the toxic pharmaceuticals that kill about 300,000 Americans every year, and I'm talking about the proper use of over-the-counter and prescription drugs, folks. Look at the drug statistics. Whereas most years, not one single human being in North America dies from the use of herbs, but there does seem to be grave concern about herbal safety. In this mix of crazy medicines, it happens to be that there's a small group that we know as the hallucinogens or the psychedelics or the entheogens, ayahuasca being one of them. And these possess extraordinary healing power. And that healing goes further than just relieving a headache, relieving trauma, relieving stress, relieving PTSD, which, by the way, can be absolutely game-changing life experiences. Because it also enables us to smash the parenthetical boundaries within which we live and within which we think. It enables us to hack the very motherboard of consciousness. And when you hack the motherboard of consciousness, you get to rewrite your own programs. You get to decide what you want to be in this world, what life you want to live in this world, what human being you want to be, how you want to walk through this time that you have. These are the promises of the psychedelics. Yes, it's great to get loaded. We used to do LSD and go to Mount Auburn Cemetery in Cambridge in the summer and run around and chase bunnies. It was a riot. We would go sit at Mary Baker Eddy's grave and look at the ducks in the pond and go, pretty nice headstone here. You know, that's fun too. That's fun too. But the great promise of these things is the promise of infinity. The great promise of these things is limitless consciousness. People talk about evolution. What does it mean? It means integration. It means harmony. It means love as a navigational pole star in your life. It means a grand vision of what's possible. It means not being constricted by fears and concerns and traumas and the debris and dross and dreck that clings to us as we move through this ever toxic and difficult world. It means being open. It means having the experience of complete interconnectedness. And what happens when you have the experience of complete interconnectedness? you realize you're not in it alone. In fact, there's no you alone to be in anything. That we are all one mind, and that mind manifesting, that great big mind, as Buddha called it, the great mind, the vast pool of limitless consciousness, is something we can tap into. People make a big deal out of Moses seeing a burning bush. Who cares that some guy 2,000 years ago saw a burning bush? You take ayahuasca, in the first half hour of your first night, you're going to see at least a burning bush. You're going to see entire universes grow and evolve and collapse and disappear into the vast blackness of space and then reoccur again in all sorts of dimensions. That's what's going to happen. And the age of the intermediaries is over. You don't have to get your dusty old theology from pedophile priests. You can get it, you can get your dusty old theology another way. You can get your fresh, vital, what is religion? The remembrance of spirit. You don't need a real estate holding agency to give you that, or to give you permission to listen to somebody tell you about a couple of guys 2,000 years ago who had some experiences that you can't have, and you can't talk with them about it because they're long dead. Instead, you can take the pipe, you can take the glass, you can eat the mushroom, you can be in a shamanic journey, you can have this experience of the sacred for yourself. And it's the experience of the sacred. It's the experience of the universal. It's the experience of the vast, limitless, and yes, very bizarre and imponderable as the entire purity of consciousness works through the kinks and permutations of our own minds. I mean, how we see these things, whether we see these things as elves or crystal skulls vomiting golden jewels down our nostrils. However we experience this. I mean, I once had a bunch of snakes show up and they said, hey, listen, would you mind if we went into your body through your nose and ate up some dark matter? And I said, no, have at it, guys. And they went in like little Pac-Men and they went around and they cleaned up and they left. I said, hey, thanks a lot. I said, okay, see ya. Okay, that's weird. That's weird. I mean, there are religions founded on smaller visions than that. We all know that. But, however it is that we translate this, what's the effect? A greater sense of lightness, a greater sense of joy, a greater sense of peace, a greater sense of freedom, a greater sense of happiness. How are we going to live this life? The psychedelics are not the answer, but they are forbidden fruits. They are the taboo foods that help us to better understand who we are. And I say, do the taboo. Thank you very much.